Hello, my name is Colin McHugh, and I interviewed a CFO, controller, and financial leader who is also my girlfriend's father. He works for an aircraft parts supply company and asked that his name and more specific company details to be left out of this presentation because of the YouTube submission and the fact that they're currently seeking to raise significant capital from an outside financial investment firm. So a brief description of the firm. They work with supplying airplane parts to major airlines. They're a smaller and more private company, but supply parts to countries around the world, including the US, Europe, Middle Eastern, Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Has operations here in Arizona as well as a plant in Ireland that was recently dismantled due to the rapid impact on the travel industry brought along by COVID-19. Competition in this industry is not really prevalent since they offer such specific service, um, but they do face competition from some of the other smaller firms that are really struggling for liquid assets. They're actually selling some of their parts under asset value, which makes it hard for his company because they're not really able to compete with prices under what they're able to buy them from. Some of these other smaller companies, instead of doing that, are also turning to mergers and getting eaten up by bigger businesses, which the bigger businesses are really in competition with his business, which is smaller, but you never want to see your competitors getting stronger. So at his job, he works on all major financial decisions within the firm and mentions that some of those more prevalent ones include who to hire and more recently who to fire at the firm, and also which customers to lend a line of credit to. And by that I mean a lot of the major airlines right now don't have a lot of extra cash on hand, so he's got to decide out of these airlines which ones to extend a line of credit to, which ones are trustworthy and will pay him back in the future. So one of the questions that I found really interesting was the one on business strategy, and I found this interesting because it reflects on a major concept that we've learned in class and kind of gives us a real-world example of what it means to, in this case, have a cost and niche strategy. So the niche aspect comes because they really only service single lane, single aisle aircraft that's more like commercial flight, like the Boeing 737. They focus on these specific parts, and it's actually helped them out recently because these commercial aircraft are some of the ones that have been taken out of the graveyard because of this pandemic and put back up in the air as of recent. He says that about 70% of the original planes before the pandemic are already back up and flying again, which is really good to see and is really good for his business. They also are small, but they do have a global footprint with that plant that was recently taken down in Dublin, Ireland. It goes to show that even the small companies do need more of a global footprint because he is dealing with countries all over the world, and it's a lot easier to have warehouses in like more central locations, and you can't just have one in the US if you're going to be working with all those other players. So part of being a niche, they get an advantage over the bigger companies in speed and flexibility. When they're working with their customers, because they're smaller and don't deal with as many people and have to ship out as many parts, they're able to get the part that the customer needs in a more timely manner and be able to ship it out a lot faster than some of the bigger companies will be able to. As far as low cost goes, they're not really trying to be the cost leader in their industry. They're just trying to keep on par and match what other small businesses that they're competing with are pricing their parts at. The other interesting question is their core competencies. I like that question because it shows how management conducts businesses or their business and strategic decision making. So their core competencies include technical specialists, proper inventory mix, entrepreneurial spirit, and quality systems. So what this means is that they're not just pushing any part to someone, they're making sure it's 100% trustworthy when they sell a part to one of their customers. That means it has the right paperwork, trace documentation, and it's from a reputable repair and overhaul shop. In this industry, trust goes a long way, and part of having trust is a good reputation. when people buy these plane parts from businesses like his, they need to make sure that they're 100% going to work. They need to make sure that that part is not going to malfunction, especially when the plane is up in the air. It's crucial, and it can ruin a business if they have a bad experience with a supplier that gives them a faulty part. So what they've got going for them so far, they have a proven track record of working with large airlines like Southwest and Scandinavian. Um, this allows them to kind of build up a repertoire with other companies that look at them. They see their track record of working with big players. They see that nothing's gone wrong, and now all of a sudden the customer is able to completely trust the supplier. Huge in this industry. But it also goes both ways. Customers also need to be trustworthy by the suppliers. When we're talking about lines of credit, this doesn't always happen, but during harsh times like the pandemic, when companies don't have a lot of cash on hand, you need to make sure that your customers they're trustworthy and that they will pay you back. How do you do this? How do you decide how long to extend the credit for to give them credit at all? Well, you got to look at a few things. You got to look at the reputation of the airline industry. A lot of the U.S. airlines are a lot more reputable than some in other countries, and this isn't just because they run their business differently. It's because the government are giving different levels of support to airlines in different countries. So it's a lot easier to be able to depend on an airline in anywhere in the United States rather than, let's say, Colombia. So good relationships between customers and suppliers are also important because it gives both a little bit of leeway to work. So the example is a UPS scheduled maintenance on one of their flights. UPS gets scheduled maintenance on their flights or on their planes. It doesn't necessarily mean they need the part, but it's just to make sure that they are smooth sailing in the future. Now, UPS is scheduled for this part, but a smaller airline industry needs the part today. UPS doesn't necessarily need the part, but if they have good supplier and customer relationships, then maybe they can delay the UPS fixture of the part and give it to the other customer who really needs it. So one of the biggest things I learned from doing this interview is just getting a closer insight on one of the hardest hit sectors of business that's come along from this pandemic. It's still interesting to see that while times are hard now, even small businesses in the airline industry have a positive outlook for the future. Despite a clear cash problem that's temporary, hopefully, they still know that they're vital and have a unique role in air flight that is not easily replaced. So I think it's most important to share that just seeing how important every aspect of business is to a whole. So the air travel industry has been hit very hard by the pandemic, but a lot of people just think about some of the major front runners like Delta, United, Southwest. They don't really think about the guys back in the supply chain. And it's important to see how macro events like the pandemic make their way through the supply chain and are able to hurt virtually everyone in some form or another. It's more important to see why building supplier trust is essential because of hard times like we're seeing right now. When everything falls apart, it is very beneficial to be able to trust your whole supply chain and make do so that everyone can move forward with these macro setbacks that are thrown in their way and come out hopefully around where they left off. Thank you for listening.